Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power. All right, so we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. I just want to give people time to tune in before I get started. Just bear with me. I know it's very early in the morning, so we probably won't get that many people. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. Yesterday, I did a live stream about the ADOS movement. And basically, I talked about how it's counterproductive, counter-revolutionary, it's reactionary, and it doesn't serve the interests of African Americans at the end of the day. I thoroughly explained that. I will post the links in the cards for those of you who have not seen that video. But in response to that, I received a flood of negative comments, but I also received quite a few positive comments. I received a lot of people thumbing down my video and stuff like that. You know, a lot of these people that don't even have real channels, you know, people that don't even have subscribers or post content. And I'm sure some of these people are bots and all that kind of stuff, or mindless drones that follow Yvette, Carnell, and Antonio Moore without thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the comments now, respond to a lot of the things that people were saying at that particular time, and also respond to a couple of comments that I noticed in the chat room during that particular live stream. And hopefully today I'll be able to have enough time to respond to your comments live in the chat room. I'm going to have to cut this short in about an hour, so I should have more than enough time to both respond to the comments and to respond to the people in the chat room. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and then we can get right into it. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so this is the video that I did yesterday. And as you can see, I received a lot of comments. And basically what I did is I took off the ratings for the video, because I want, you know, it's so easy for somebody to just come and click a rating and stuff like that and thumbs down a video simply because they disagree with it. This forces people to actually have a dialogue, people that would just ordinarily thumb something down without thinking. So I took that off. So I want to respond to some of these comments that I received. You know, I went through the comments and I highlighted a few points that some people have made throughout this, you know, throughout this video. And one of the things that people kept mentioning, they kept talking about reparations. And one person in particular in the chat room, they were suggesting that somehow I was advocating that white America give reparations to Black immigrants. You know, first of all, I never said that anywhere in this particular video. That is not my position at all. So people that are suggesting that, I just wonder if you were listening to this particular live stream, like how would you reach that conclusion? I never said that. I believe in reparations for people who are descendants of slaves in America. You know, so white America owes a debt to our ancestors that toiled for hundreds of years without compensation, without a doubt. I've made that perfectly clear. I've done many videos in support of reparations. All you have to do is search New Possibilities and Reparations. You'll see my video about you'll see my video responding to the article that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote, talking about the case for reparations. You'll see that video. You'll see countless other videos that I did about reparations. So obviously I support reparations for African Americans who are descendants of slaves. Obviously I support that. You know, so that's not an issue. I've never advocated for white America to be paying reparations to Black immigrants. So let's be perfectly clear about that. And the other thing is this: do I believe that people in the Caribbean should receive reparations in some degree? They should receive reparations, but not from white America. They need to receive reparations from the colonialists that are responsible for their enslavement, like the people in Jamaica and the Caribbean, and they deserve reparations from Europe. As do we. We deserve reparations from Europe as well, but they deserve reparations from Europe, from various European countries that colonized them, that enslaved them. You know, whether we're talking about parts of South America or we're talking about the Caribbean, they are entitled to reparations from their colonialists, you know, the people that colonized them, the people that oppressed them, the people that enslaved them should pay reparations to them. And those are European countries, not white America. So so that's not an issue here. I don't understand why people even raise that particular point, suggesting that I was saying that white America should pay reparations to immigrants. I never said that. So that's one thing that needs to be addressed. Another thing that needs to be pointed out is this. You know, a lot of people kept saying, well, it's not about, you know, this ADOS ideology is not trying to divide Africans and stuff like that. But how can you say that when you have the, you know, you have this Antonio Moore basically saying that people who are not descendants of slaves in America cannot basically represent the interests of African Americans. That's the point that he made about Obama. That's the point that he made about Kamala Harris. That's the point that he made about Joy Reid. He cited them as examples to point out that people who are not American descendants of slaves cannot represent the interests of American descendants of slaves. And, you know, there's so many examples of African, you know, Black people who were immigrants or, you know, children of immigrants who actually did strongly advocate on behalf of African Americans. And that was the point that I was raising in this video. That's what I was trying to point out. That's what I did point out. You know, and I cited 3 examples of this to contradict this argument that this guy was making. You know, I cited the example of Marcus Garvey. I cited the example of Kwame Ture and other examples in my personal life of people that are children of immigrants or people who were in fact immigrants who contributed to the African American struggle. And then, you know, some of the subscribers, some of the people that watched this particular video also pointed out other examples. Examples such as Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know, if you follow their logic, you know, the logic of these people that have embraced this narrow-minded ideology, they would say, well, Farrakhan can't speak for African Americans. They would negate people like Farrakhan. They would deny them a role in our struggle. And I think that that's absolutely asinine. There's been no other, I mean, like Farrakhan has been a fierce advocate for African Americans in this country. Whether you agree with his ideology or not, whether you agree with his religion or not, whether you have points of contention with him or not, the fact of the matter is that brother's been a fierce advocate for African Americans. So to, you know, put out some blanket statement that suggested people who are from the Caribbean or from Africa can't speak about the African Americans experience, or they, you know, they don't know about the African American experience, I think that that's absurd. And then you have other examples, you know, like Malcolm X. One of his parents was from the Caribbean. You know, and other people have cited like Harriet Belafonte. You know, somebody that was in the front lines of the civil rights movement, marching with King for civil rights, financially supporting the civil rights movement. So I just think that this ideology where you're saying that people that are descendants of immigrants can't represent African Americans, that's alienating people. That's dividing people. When you say that you're not going to push for issues that are relevant to our Black immigrant brothers and sisters, that's alienating people. That's dividing people. And I don't understand why this is such a hard concept for people to get their mind around. It's very simple. The other thing is that you had people talking about the need to push a Black agenda. And the fact of the matter is you can push a Black agenda without alienating your fellow African brothers and sisters, your Black brothers and sisters who are immigrants. You don't have to alienate them in order to push a Black agenda. You can push a Black agenda without doing that, without like pushing aside our brothers and sisters from the continent and from the Caribbean. These two things are not mutually exclusive. Now, these people that get on here talking about for the first time, we're pushing a Black agenda. I mean, these people, I don't understand like how they could be so ignorant. I mean, these people are acting like before you had these people get online and talk about ADOS, that all the time before there was nobody advocating for a Black agenda. That is so ridiculous, man. There have been plenty of movements, plenty of organizations that have been pushing for a Black agenda, that have brought their Black agenda before politicians, who have lobbied politicians. And you can do both. You can push for a Black agenda while embracing issues that are important to our immigrant brothers and sisters. You can push a Black agenda while pushing for different policies that affect our brothers and sisters on the African continent and throughout the diaspora. Just like how our brothers and sisters here helped end apartheid in South Africa by calling for boycotts against South Africa and companies that do business in South Africa. That's an example of us here in America doing what we can to affect our brothers and sisters on the continent. And while people were doing that, while they were pushing for ending apartheid, they were also here in America fighting diligently for civil rights for African Americans. Here in America, fighting for the interests of people that are impacted by poverty, people that are impacted by mass incarceration, people that are impacted by a failing school system. You can do things simultaneously. And by doing these things, you can build allies that are necessary in pushing forth a Black agenda. Our African brothers and sisters are necessary, whether they're in America or abroad. They can help us push for reparations in the UN. They can call, there were countries that called for, support of reparations for African Americans. And it's through alliances that we're able to make these things happen. And that's one of the points that I wanted to make. Now, you also have a lot of people say, well, that immigrants don't want to have anything to do with African Americans. That was one of the popular comments that people left. And, I just have to address that. First of all, I'll say this. There are many examples of Africans and people in the Caribbean who had everything to do with African Americans, who were a part of our struggle, as I mentioned before. And I'm going to go to a comment where they lay out some of the names, but another name from the Harlem Renaissance era is Claude McKay, another person of Caribbean descent. And there's quite a few examples. Just bear with me a second. Someone left an extensive comment, and I just want to go to that real quick. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, this brother left a long comment with Yeah, so I don't want to hold you all up, but yeah, the brother left an example, a comment citing all these people that are, of Caribbean descent that have been actively engaged in our struggle. And also in terms of Africa, there are a lot of examples like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Soko Toure, like all these pan-Africanists that advocated for African-American rights, civil rights and human rights, who embraced the Pan-African movement. There are many examples. And the thing that I have to address is just this indoctrination. Indoctrination is part of the reason why we do, in fact, have a divide between our brothers and sisters on the continent and our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, and, between us and them because of indoctrination. In terms of how they view us, they get their perceptions from television and media, which constantly reinforces this message that that African Americans are criminals, that African Americans are lazy, that African Americans are stupid. Like, you constantly see these images in the news of Black people as criminals. You constantly hear this stuff in the music that promotes this idea that we're drug dealers, that we're thugs, that we're gangsters, that we're pimps, that we're drug users and abusers, that we have no respect for women. These are the types of images that are constantly put out there. They constantly project the image of the Black man as an entertainer instead of somebody that actually builds. So obviously this is going to create a lot of negative perceptions. And I think that there's a lot of ignorance as well. Like, a lot of people are not aware of the impact of slavery on African Americans. They're not aware of the legacy of Jim Crow and how it impacts us today in terms of our ability to build wealth. And I think that what needs to happen is we need more education among our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean and from parts of Africa. They need to be informed about our plight so that they can understand and empathize and sympathize with our situation. And the same is true for the African American. We need to be informed of the plight of our brothers and sisters on the continent. We need to have knowledge of Africa and of the situation there, because a lot of times we are ignorant. We have been taught negative things about Africa. We've been taught that Africa is the dark continent. We've been taught that it's uncivilized, that people are savage, that people are primitive in Africa. Our image of Africa often goes back to Tarzan, where you got people living just in huts and people swinging from trees and living like savages and cannibals. That's the negative image that we have. I remember, and I'm sure that many of you remember, that calling somebody an African used to be an insult back in the day. People used to talk about African booty scratches and all that kind of stuff. That's what they would talk about. And all that did, this negative programming, all it did is help to divide and conquer Black people worldwide. None of us benefit from African people being fragmented. None of us. We're already a minority in this country, and you want to have us infighting with Black immigrants, alienating Black immigrants and them alienating us. That doesn't serve our interests at all. It undermines us as a people. And then a lot of people talked about like how Africans aren't helping us and all this and that. And you have examples, of Africans that have done things for African Americans. I mean, one of the biggest examples that comes to mind is Muammar Gaddafi, in terms of what he did to help the Nation of Islam. So that would be an example. The work of Kwame Nkrumah, Soko Toure, and many other Pan-Africanists, as I mentioned before. And I was watching this video where somebody was talking about like what has Pan-Africanism given American descendants of slaves? Like, what are the tangible benefits to American descendants of slaves from Pan-Africanism? And this is the thing that I want to say about that. Pan-Africanism hasn't been able to flourish. Like, Pan-Africanism hasn't really had a chance to become manifest and actually take off, because there have been efforts to fight Pan-Africanism. You've had Pan-Africanist leaders overthrown on the continent, you know, by the forces of imperialism. You know, there are countless examples. Kwame Ture was overthrown. You had the brother Patrice Lumumba assassinated. So there are all these examples of revolutionary Black Pan-Africanists who stood up and advocated for Pan-Africanism, you know, for African people worldwide, and they were taken out. So we weren't able to manifest, you know, a lot of the Pan-Africanist ideas and ideals. Just like people in America haven't been able to make the ideas of Black nationalism real, because there's been an onslaught on Black revolutionaries in this country. The ideals of revolutionary socialism haven't been able to manifest because of the attack on Black revolutionaries. We know about what happened to the Black Panther Party, how many of the leaders were assassinated, how many of the leaders were locked up, and many of them are still locked up today. We know about the counterintelligence program, where people like Malcolm X were assassinated, people like Martin Luther King were assassinated. So in many ways, like, the ideas of Pan-Africanism have not been able to become manifest because there's been an onslaught, a war against Pan-Africanism. And these people that promote this ADOS ideology are participating in the war against Pan-Africanism. They are serving the interests of the imperialists by dividing African people. And then you had all these people like respond to what I said about Obama. You know, you had these people still saying over and over again that Obama did nothing for Black people, which is pure nonsense. Like, none of these people were able to provide any kind of real substantive rebuttal to all the examples that I cited of things that Obama did for Black people. But yet and still, these people still are parroting this nonsense that Obama did nothing for Black people. And then some people will say, well, even when you provide some examples that have universal application, like, they dismiss that by saying, well, that wasn't specifically for African Americans, so that doesn't count. So even if you have something like the Affordable Care Act, which disproportionately benefits African Americans, they'll say, well, that doesn't count because he didn't specifically target African Americans. I mean, that kind of logic is so flawed and so ridiculous. It doesn't matter if that particular program wasn't focused solely on African Americans if African Americans are the ones who disproportionately benefit from it. So you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, well, because some other people happen to benefit from this particular program, then it's no good? To me, that's ridiculous. That's like these people that attack affirmative action and say, because other groups benefit, then it's of no use to African Americans, when thousands upon thousands of Black people are able to get an education because of programs like affirmative action. So these people just go out of their way to promote this nonsense, you know. And again, I cited these examples of these other people who have done things despite not being American descendants of slaves that has been beneficial to Black people. They have advocated for Black people on the front lines in the civil rights struggle for Black people. So let me go to this last section of comments that I wanted to respond to. But first, I'm going to try to see if I can find this section where someone provided a thorough example of people that have done things for African Americans. Yeah, I found it. I found this section. And there's even another section where somebody goes into more detail. But I'm going to go to this particular point. But before I do, I want to shout out the people that are tuning in. It's super early, so I know that aren't that many people checking me out right now. Shout out to David Bowman, Shout out to Ebony Knowledge. Shout out to Sandy Girl. Thanks for tuning in. You know, I appreciate your support. And that brings me to another thing real quick before I go to this last couple of points or whatever. And that's this. You know, I appreciate the support that I'm receiving on this channel. And I want to thank people for supporting me. You know, we don't have to agree all the time. You know, there are going to be moments when we disagree. And if you follow somebody just because you agree with them 100% of the time, I think something's wrong with you. You know, I think that what we need to do is be open-minded and be willing to respectfully disagree with one another. You know, so because I did that video yesterday, you had some people decide to unsubscribe, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But a lot of times people just want an echo chamber. They don't want anybody that's going to disagree with them or challenge their viewpoints. And in the moment that somebody does challenge their viewpoints, they bail out. And I just think that that's a sign of weakness. You know, I really do. I think that it's weak for somebody to do something like that. And, you know, I just want to be perfectly clear. Like, I'm not one of these people that just go with the flow, you know, to just say what's popular, what's popping for the second. You know, I'm not one of these people that sit back and see what's trending, to see what's popular. Like some of these people, their sole motivation on here is just to accumulate money. And they know that they can do this by just saying what is popular, going with the flow. That's not what I do. I speak on principle. I speak from the heart. And if I'm not feeling something, I will speak out against it, even if it's unpopular, even if it means that people are going to unsub or people are going to thumbs down things or whatever. I don't care about that. I care about advocating for the truth. That's what I care about. And, you know, these fair weather followers can go to hell, man. You feel me? You know, these people that are just with you when you speak in a way that they agree with. When you say everything that they agree with, they rhyme with you. The moment you have one disagreement, they bail out. Those are fair weather friends, man. These people ain't down with me. They never were down with me. And to see them leave is to get rid of dead weight. You know, you feel me? So, you know, I keep it moving. I stand on the truth, regardless of how people may feel about it. This movement, you know, this ADOS movement is divisive. It is dividing, you know, African Americans from our brothers and sisters on the continent, and, you know, our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean. And that's the last thing we need in this community, to be further divided. Like, you also have these people that divide up Black people by saying, well, if one of your parents was white, then you're not Black, and all that kind of stuff. You know, further fragmenting a group that's already a minority. And another point that I want to make is, you know, about this ADOS movement, it's just about how it focuses on identity in a way that's problematic. Our identity shouldn't revolve around slavery. Our history predates slavery. You know, our history didn't begin with us being enslaved in this country. Our history is bigger than that. You know, and it's like this identity that these people want to focus on emphasizes their American identity over their African identity. And I think that that's problematic. You know, it says American descendants of slaves. Like, that's what they emphasize. The fact that they are Americans over their African identity and his heritage and history. And I think that that's problematic. And it reminds me of what Brother Malcolm X said about being American. You know, he talked about how he wasn't an American. He talked about how we are victims of America. Victims of America. Victims of, Jim Crow. Victims of being enslaved in this country. You know, his identity wasn't tied to America. And I think that that's one of the things that's deeply problematic about this ADOS movement, how the identity is fixated on America and fixated on slavery. And I know that, you know, in terms of slavery, of course, that's necessary to focus on in terms of getting reparations. But slavery doesn't define who we are. Slavery was an interruption of our development as a people. Slavery was an interruption of our history, as I've seen posted many times before. So we shouldn't allow ourselves to be defined solely by slavery and solely by our confines in this country by talking about we are American descendants of slaves. You know, and I just wonder why they don't even use the word African descendants of slaves. They say American descendants of slaves. And as I pointed out before, like this ideology, like people had the nerve to criticize me, you know, question my loyalty to the community. And I'm going to get into that in a second. While they're praising and embracing the ideologies, an ideology that in many ways is parallel to Trumpism, in many ways is parallel to this anti-immigrant sentiment of the far right, you know, the alt-right, the white supremacists, who simply don't want to see a browning of America. That is their agenda. They don't want to see Black people come to this country. And here you have these Negroes basically co-signing that anti-immigrant bigotry and xenophobia. And I think that that's appalling. I think that it's sickening. And it's disgusting, man. It's disgusting that you have these people embracing these right-wing policies. And somehow they think that they're going to get reparations. They're going to get these economic reforms that they seek by not having alliances with others, by not building coalitions when African Americans only make up 13% of the population. To me, that's idiotic. To me, that makes no sense at all. And, you know, you had a couple of people in the comment section talking about I'm a coon for stating my opposition to the ADOS movement. And when I saw those comments, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, my initial reaction was, get the fuck out of here with that nonsense. How am I a coon for advocating for African unity? How is that cooning? How is advocating for pan-Africanism cooning when the greatest minds in our history advocated for pan-Africanism, like the brother Malcolm X, like the brother Marcus Garvey, like the brother Kwame Ture, like the brother W.E.B. Du Bois? You telling me that those brothers are coons because they advocated for the unity of African people, because they weren't promoting disunity among African people? No, you are the coon by promoting division among African people, by helping white supremacists divide Black people up. You're the one that's cooning. You are the one that's cooning by promoting that division. I mean, these people are so illiterate. Like, some of these people are so illiterate and so uninformed, it's ridiculous. They probably never read Malcolm. They probably never even read Marcus Garvey. Probably never even read Kwame Ture. Probably never read from these pan-Africanists like Kwame Nkrumah or Julius Nyerere or Soko Toure. And the list goes on and on. And they have the audacity to call me a coon. Pan-Africanism is not coonery. Black unity is not coonery. And for those people that want to say that I'm a coon, you don't belong on this channel. You belong elsewhere. And go, you know, that's what you need to do, go elsewhere. These same people that are calling me a damn coon are the same people that's co-signing Yvette Carnell, and she's the one wearing the Make America Great Again hat. She's the one basically getting all moist about Donald Trump and how he conducted himself during a press conference. And you got the nerve to call me a coon. You got the nerve to call me a coon. Get the hell out of here with that nonsense. But anyway, I just want to thank y'all for tuning in. Let me see what people are saying before I sign out. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. And I may open up a live stream and invite these ADOS people on the live stream to debate them live so that we can have this discussion live, you know, so that we can have this debate live. You know, I'll debate any of these people. I'll debate an Yvette Carnell. I'll debate Antonio Moore. I'll debate any of their followers and stuff like that. You know, I'll debate somebody that, but I'm not going to get on here and have a debate with somebody that doesn't even do content. You know, I'll tell you that right up front. I'm not going to debate somebody that doesn't post content, somebody that has 0 subscribers. That's a waste of my time and my energy. But if you have a channel and you actually post content on a regular basis, I'll be happy to debate you live on this particular issue. Have a respectful debate. Yeah, so let me see what if there's some additional comments before I sign out. Yes, Yasmin made a great point. Yeah, about the things that we could accomplish if we're united, man. And it's like we're so focused on division that it undermines, you know, our capabilities, man. So yeah, so I want to thank you all for tuning in. Again, I may do a debate on this, a live debate with people that want to challenge my views or whatever. If you're interested in having such a debate, post your email address in the you know, in the comment section, and I'll reach out to you. You know, I'll check out your channel. You know, I'm particularly interested in debating those people that I'm familiar with. But if I check out your channel, you seem to be cool, I will debate you as well. So, you know, please feel free to leave your email addresses in the comments section, or you can email me directly if you have concerns about your privacy. You can email me directly expressing your interest in joining such a discussion. My email address is newpossibilitiesblog@yahoo.com. Again, that's newpossibilitiesblog@yahoo.com. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the channel, share the videos, and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. Peace.